"You should be in a home, not here," my daughter said with a firmness that echoed through the small living room as she methodically packed my belongings into cardboard boxes. The weight of her words hung in the air, more piercing than any argument we'd ever had. Her name is Julia, and once upon a time, she was the little girl whose scraped knees I would bandage, whose hands I held through every first day of school nervousness. But today, she wasn't that Julia, not the one with wide eyes full of possibilities and dreams. I watched her, my own flesh and blood, trying to pack away not just my things, but me, into a life I never asked for. I suppose this didn't come out of nowhere. If I rewind just a bit, you'll see the small cracks that formed over time, turning something once strong into something fragile. My name is Martha, just your average 65-year-old from Ohio, happily settled in the quiet suburbs. My life had a rhythm, a simple comfort, a stroll in the park, coffee with old friends at the local diner, and evenings in my cozy living room, a cat purring softly on my lap. Julia saw things differently, though. To her, each of my ordinary days was an argument for change. Saturday mornings were my favorite, with a routine that began at sunrise. I'd make my way to the farmer's market, basket in hand, indulging in the colorful displays of fresh fruits and vegetables. It was my own little paradise. Yet, every pleasant interaction with the vendors was shadowed by Julia's increasing insistence that I needed supervision. Once, seeing my delight as I purchased a sun-ripened peach, she'd remarked, "Enjoy them while you can, Mom." It rang ominously, more than a mere comment, but a warning of what she thought was inevitable. I remember a day, maybe 2 months ago, folding warm laundry in the afternoon sun. The familiar sense of spring danced through the open window. Julia stopped by, surveyed the room, and a smile tugged at her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a moment filled with nostalgia, yet tainted with the knowledge that she believed it wouldn't last. Each visit was laced with subtle hints and growing tensions, as if she were waiting for an opportunity to voice her concerns, the ones that I never shared. This is my story, the story of a mother and a daughter lost in translation, intertwined yet divided by differing visions of love and care. If you've ever faced the challenging tides of family decisions, or thought of what it means to fight for your own independence, tap that subscribe button and click the notification bell. You'll want to follow this journey and see how standing up for your life and choices unfolds. I sat there, in the midst of the chaos of half-packed boxes, my heart heavy with the weight of Julia's words. The air in the living room felt thicker now, as if her declaration had sucked out all the warmth that once lingered in the corners of this house. My house. The one I'd made a home after years of hard work, after raising her and her brother on my own, after turning every empty wall into a gallery of memories. There was the faded spot on the couch where Julia used to curl up with her favorite book, the scuff marks on the floor from her first clumsy attempts at roller skating indoors. Every inch of this place held a story, and now she wanted to pack it all away. Pack me away, like I was nothing more than an outdated piece of furniture. Julia moved with a clinical efficiency, folding my clothes into neat piles, labeling boxes with a black marker in her precise handwriting. "Mom, I'm doing this for your own good," she said, her voice steady but devoid of the softness I used to know. "You can't keep pretending everything's fine. What if you fall again? What if you forget to turn off the stove? I can't be here every day to check on you." Her words weren't new. I'd heard variations of this speech for months, maybe even a year. But today, they carried a finality that made my stomach churn. This wasn't just a suggestion anymore. This was a decision, and I hadn't been invited to the table where it was made. I wanted to argue, to tell her I wasn't some fragile relic that needed to be stored away in a nursing home. I wanted to remind her that I still walked to the farmer's market every Saturday, that I still knew the names of every neighbor on this street, that I wasn't ready to give up the life I'd built. But the words caught in my throat, tangled up with the hurt of seeing my own daughter treat me like a problem to be solved. Instead, I just watched her, my hands folded in my lap, feeling smaller with every item she tucked into those boxes. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Julia and I were a team, when she'd call me just to chat about her day, when she'd laugh at my terrible attempts at baking cookies. But somewhere along the line, things shifted. I think it started after her father passed, though I can't pinpoint the exact moment. Maybe it was when she got that high-powered job in the city, the one that kept her so busy she could only visit once a month. Or maybe it was when she started dating Mark, her fiancé, who always seemed to have an opinion about everything, including me. Mark, with his polished suits and clipped way of speaking, had a knack for planting doubts in Julia's mind. I'd overheard him once, during a holiday dinner, muttering something about liability while glancing in my direction. Liability. That's what I'd become to them. Mark wasn't here today, but his presence lingered in the way Julia carried herself, in the way she parroted phrases I knew weren't hers. "We just want what's best for you," she said now, taping up a box with a screech of packing tape that grated on my nerves. "Mark and I have been looking at places, really nice ones. You'll have your own room and there's staff to help with everything." She didn't look at me as she spoke, and I wondered if it was because she couldn't bear to see the betrayal in my eyes, or maybe she just didn't care. I thought about Mark, about how he'd always been the quiet force behind Julia's growing distance. He wasn't family, not yet, but he'd inserted himself into every decision that mattered. I remembered a moment from last Christmas when he'd casually suggested I sell the house before the market dips. He'd framed it as financial advice, but I saw the glint in his eyes, the way he looked around my home like he was appraising it for himself. I'd brushed it off then, chalking it up to his business-minded nature. But now, with Julia packing my life away, I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to it. What did he stand to gain from me being out of the picture? Was this just about protecting me, or was there something else at play? My gaze drifted to the mantelpiece, where a small, tarnished silver frame held a photograph of my late husband, Tom, and me on our wedding day. That frame wasn't just a keepsake. It was a symbol of everything I'd fought for after he was gone. Raising 2 kids on a single income, keeping this house through lean years when the mortgage payments felt like a noose, building a life that was mine. This house wasn't just 4 walls and a roof. It was my independence, my proof that I could stand on my own. And now, Julia and Mark wanted to take that from me, to strip away the one thing that still felt like mine. I forced myself to speak, my voice quieter than I intended. "Julia, I don't want to go to a home. This is my home. I've lived here for over 30 years. I'm not ready to leave it." She paused, her hands stilling on a stack of my sweaters, but she didn't turn to face me. For a moment, I thought I saw her shoulders slump, like maybe my words had reached her. But then she straightened, her resolve hardening again. "Mom, we've been over this. You can't stay here alone anymore. It's not safe. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to protect you. Protect me." That word stung more than anything else she'd said. I didn't need protection. I needed to be seen, to be heard, to be treated like a person instead of a burden. But Julia wasn't listening, not really. She was too caught up in her own narrative, the one where she was the responsible daughter doing the hard thing, the one where Mark's logic trumped my feelings. And I couldn't help but feel that every box she packed was another brick in the wall she was building between us. The doorbell rang. A sharp interruption to the suffocating silence that had settled over us. Julia glanced at me, a flicker of irritation crossing her face, as if I'd somehow orchestrated this distraction. "I'll get it," she said, wiping her hands on her jeans as she crossed the room. I stayed where I was, my fingers tracing the worn armrest of my chair, trying to anchor myself in the familiarity of this space while I still could. When Julia returned, she wasn't alone. Mark stepped into the living room behind her, his tall frame filling the doorway, his expression unreadable. He wore a crisp button-down shirt, as if he'd just come from a meeting, and his eyes swept over the boxes with a satisfied nod. "Looks like you're making progress," he said to Julia, his tone clipped and businesslike. Then he turned to me, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Martha, how are you holding up?" I didn't answer right away. What could I say? That I felt like my life was being dismantled piece by piece? that I resented the way he looked at me, like I was a project to be managed. Instead, I forced a tight smile and said, "I've been better." He didn't press, just gave a curt nod and turned back to Julia, murmuring something about a phone call he needed to make. I watched him step outside, his phone already pressed to his ear, and I felt a cold dread settle in my chest. Mark wasn't just a bystander in this. He was a facilitator, the one who'd convinced Julia that this was the right path, and I couldn't shake the feeling that his motives weren't as altruistic as he wanted us to believe. Julia resumed packing, but now there was a new tension in the air, a silent acknowledgement of Mark's influence. I thought about all the little moments over the past year, his offhand comments about the house's value, his suggestions that I downsize, the way he'd started referring to my routines as risks. Each one had been a microaggression, a subtle jab at my independence, and I'd ignored them, hoping they meant nothing. But now, seeing him here, seeing the way Julia deferred to him, I couldn't ignore them anymore. There was a pattern, and I was starting to see it for what it was, a calculated push to get me out of the way. I needed to clear my head, to escape the suffocating weight of this moment. "I'm going to take a walk," I said abruptly, standing before Julia could protest. She looked up, her brow furrowing, but I didn't give her a chance to argue. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door and stepped outside, the crisp Ohio air hitting my face like a slap. It was late afternoon, the sky a muted gray, and the neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional bark of a dog or rustle of leaves skittering across the sidewalk. I walked without a destination in mind, my feet carrying me down the familiar streets I'd walked 1,000 times before. Eventually, I found myself at the park, the same one where I'd pushed Julia on the swings when she was little, where I'd sat on a bench with Tom on lazy Sunday afternoons. I settled onto a bench now, my hands tucked into my pockets, and let the memories wash over me. But they weren't enough to drown out the ache in my chest, the fear of losing everything that mattered to me. I needed someone to talk to, someone who'd listen without judgment, someone who'd remind me I wasn't crazy for wanting to fight for my life. That's when I thought of Ellen, my oldest friend, the one person who'd been there through every high and low of the past 40 years. Ellen lived just a few blocks away, in a little bungalow with a garden she tended like it was her child. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Martha, what's going on? You sound upset." I took a deep breath, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Julia's packing my things, Ellen. She wants to put me in a home. She says it's for my own good, but I don't believe her. And Mark, God, I don't trust him. I think he's behind this, pushing her to do it. I don't know what to do. I don't want to lose my house, my life." My voice cracked on the last word, and I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to hold back the tears. Ellen was quiet for a moment, and I could picture her sitting at her kitchen table, her brow furrowed in concern. "Oh, Martha, I'm so sorry. I knew Julia was worried about you, but I didn't think it'd come to this. And Mark, I've never liked the way he looks at you, like he's sizing you up. Listen, why don't you come over? We'll talk it through. I'm not going anywhere, and neither should you." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and promised to head over soon. Talking to Ellen didn't solve anything, but it gave me a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. I stayed on the bench a little longer, watching a group of kids play on the swings, their laughter cutting through the quiet. I envied their freedom, their unawareness of how quickly life could turn on you. When I finally returned home, the scene was worse than I'd left it. More boxes were stacked by the door, and Julia was in the kitchen, sorting through my cabinets with a ruthless efficiency. Mark was there too, standing by the counter, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I entered, his expression shifting to something I couldn't quite read. "Good walk?" he asked, his tone casual, but there was an edge to it, a challenge I hadn't noticed before. I didn't answer, just hung my coat and moved to sit at the kitchen table, my legs feeling heavier than they should. Julia glanced at me, her hands pausing on a stack of plates. "Mom, we need to talk about the timeline." I've scheduled a tour of the facility for next week. It's one of the best in the area, and they have an opening. I think you'll like it once you see it." My chest tightened, the reality of her words hitting me like a punch. Next week. They weren't just planning this, they were executing it, fast-tracking me out of my own life. I opened my mouth to protest, but Mark cut in, his voice smooth and calculated. "Martha, I know this is hard, but it's the right thing. Julia's been losing sleep over this, worrying about you. And honestly, keeping this house up, it's too much for you. We've crunched the numbers, and selling it could set you up nicely for the future. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Selling it." There it was, the truth I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to face. My house, my sanctuary, wasn't just a burden to them. It was an asset, something to be liquidated. I looked at Mark, really looked at him, and saw the greed in his eyes, the way his mouth twitched with barely concealed anticipation. This wasn't about my safety. It was about what they stood to gain. And Julia, my own daughter, was letting it happen, either because she didn't see it or because she didn't care. I stood, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the table. "This is my home," I said, my voice low but steady. "I'm not selling it, and I'm not going anywhere. You don't get to decide that for me." Mark's smile faltered, just for a second, before it returned, colder than before. "Martha, let's be realistic. You're not in a position to make these calls anymore. You're lucky we're stepping in before something worse happens. Frankly, you should be grateful we're even bothering to help. Most people would just let you fend for yourself until you're a real liability." His words cut deeper than anything Julia had said, each one a deliberate blow to my dignity. I felt the room spin, the weight of his disdain pressing down on me, but I refused to crumble. Not here, not in front of him. I looked at Julia, searching for some sign of the daughter I knew, but her face was blank, her eyes avoiding mine. She'd chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. I turned away, my vision blurring with unshed tears, and walked to my bedroom, closing the door behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the silver frame I'd taken from the mantel, the one with Tom and me smiling into a future we couldn't have predicted. This house, this life, it was all I had left of him, of us. And I'd be damned if I let them take it from me without a fight. But as I sat there, the silence of the room pressing in, I knew this was only the beginning. The real battle was yet to come, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to win it. I sat there on the edge of my bed, the silver frame still clutched in my hands, Tom's faded smile staring back at me like a silent promise that I wouldn't let this go without a fight. The muffled sounds of Julia and Mark in the kitchen filtered through the closed door. Her clipped instructions, his low murmurs of agreement, the occasional scrape of a box being dragged across the floor. Each sound was a reminder that they weren't just planning to uproot my life. They were already doing it, piece by piece without my consent. My bedroom, once a sanctuary filled with the quiet comfort of familiar things, now felt like a shrinking cage. The walls seemed to press in, heavy with the weight of their intentions. I set the frame down on my nightstand, my fingers lingering on the cool metal, and took a deep breath. I couldn't just sit here, drowning in memories and self-pity. If I didn't act, if I didn't stand up for myself, they'd have me packed off to some sterile facility by next week. My house sold to the highest bidder. My life reduced to a few neatly labeled boxes in storage. The thought made my stomach twist with a mix of fear and fury. I wasn't ready to be erased. Not yet. Not ever. I stood, smoothing the wrinkles from my blouse with shaky hands, and opened the door. The hallway felt longer than it should have, each step toward the kitchen a deliberate choice to face them. When I entered, Julia was stacking my mismatched mugs into a box, her movements mechanical, while Mark leaned against the counter, his phone still in hand, scrolling with an air of detached authority. They both looked up as I approached, and for a moment, the room was silent, the tension so thick I could almost taste it. "Julia," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need you to stop. Right now. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not letting you pack up my life like it's nothing." This is my home, and I get to decide what happens to it. Julia's hands paused on a mug, her fingers tightening around the handle before she set it down with a small, deliberate clink. She didn't meet my eyes, her gaze fixed on the box in front of her. Mom, we've been over this. You can't stay here alone. It's not safe. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because I care. Her words, rehearsed and hollow, only stoke the anger simmering in my chest. I turned to Mark, who was watching the exchange with a faint smirk, as if this was all some predictable script he'd already read. And you, I said, my voice sharpening. I know you're behind this. I've seen the way you look at this house, like it's a piece of property to flip. What's in it for you, Mark? What do you get out of pushing me out of my own life? His smirk faded, replaced by a cool, calculating expression. He pocketed his phone and straightened, crossing his arms over his chest. Martha, you're being dramatic. I'm just trying to help Julia make the best decision for everyone. This house is too much for you to handle, and frankly, it's a financial drain. Selling it would give you and us a cushion. It's common sense. There it was again. The mention of selling. The glint of greed in his eyes that he couldn't quite hide. I felt a chill run through me, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just about my safety. It was about profit, about turning my home into a paycheck. I looked at Julia, searching for some sign that she saw through him, that she understood what he was doing. But her face remained impassive, her loyalty to him a wall I couldn't breach. Julia, I said, softer now, almost pleading, you know this isn't right. You know me. I've taken care of myself. And you. For years. I'm not some helpless old woman who needs to be locked away. Please, just listen to me. Don't let him convince you this is the only way. She finally looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a crack in the armor she'd built around herself. But then Mark cleared his throat, a subtle but pointed interruption, and her expression hardened again. Mom, I'm sorry, but I've made up my mind. Mark and I have talked it through, and this is the best option. You'll see that once you're settled, I promise. Her promise felt like a slap, empty and meaningless in the face of everything she was taking from me. I turned away, my hands balling into fists at my sides, the frustration and betrayal boiling over. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she remembered who I was, who we used to be. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. Not with Mark standing there, his influence a shadow over every word she spoke. I retreated to the living room, needing space to think, to breathe, away from the suffocating weight of their certainty. I sank into my chair, the one with the worn armrests that had cradled me through countless late nights, and stared at the boxes stacked by the door. Each one was a wound, a piece of my life stripped away without my say. I thought about Ellen's words on the phone, her quiet strength reminding me I wasn't alone, even if it felt like it in this moment. I needed to talk to her again, to hear her voice, to anchor myself before I drowned in this storm. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number, my fingers trembling as I waited for her to pick up. When she did, her tone was warm, but laced with concern. Martha, are you okay? Did something else happen? I swallowed hard, the words tumbling out in a rush. They're not stopping, Ellen. Julia's packing everything, and Mark, he's pushing for me to sell the house. It's not just about putting me in a home, it's about money. I told them no, but they're not listening. I don't know how to make them stop. I feel like I'm losing everything. Ellen sighed, the sound heavy with empathy. Oh, Martha, I'm so sorry. I wish I could be there to stand with you. But listen to me. You're stronger than you think. You've fought harder battles than this. Don't let them bully you into giving up. If they're talking about selling, you need to protect yourself. Do you have the deed to the house? Make sure it's somewhere safe, somewhere they can't get to it. And if you need me, I'll come over right now. Just say the word. Her words steadied me, a lifeline in the chaos. I thanked her, promising to keep the deed safe. Tom and I had tucked it away in a lockbox years ago, hidden in the attic where no one would think to look. I hung up, feeling a small spark of resolve ignite in my chest. Ellen was right. I couldn't just sit here and let them steamroll me. I had to fight, even if it meant standing alone. But that resolve was tested sooner than I expected. I heard footsteps approaching, the deliberate click of Mark's polished shoes on the hardwood floor, and my stomach clenched. He appeared in the doorway, his posture casual but his eyes sharp, assessing. Julia trailed behind him, her expression unreadable, a box of my books in her arms. Mark stopped a few feet away, his gaze sweeping over the room before settling on me with a calculated intensity. "Martha," he began, his voice smooth, almost conciliatory. "I know this is a lot to take in, and I'm sorry if we've come across as harsh, but we need to be practical. Julia and I have been talking, and we've come up with a solution that works for everyone. I've got a contact who's interested in buying this house. Cash offer, above market value. It's a rare opportunity. All you need to do is sign a few papers, transfer the deed to me temporarily so I can handle the sale, and we'll set aside a generous portion for your care. You won't have to worry about a thing. It's the cleanest way to wrap this up." His words hung in the air, each one a dagger aimed at the heart of everything I held dear. Transfer the deed. To him, the audacity of it, the sheer gall, left me momentarily speechless. This wasn't just a suggestion, it was a demand. A brazen attempt to seize control of my home under the guise of helping me. I could see it in his eyes, the barely concealed triumph, the certainty that I'd cave under the pressure. He thought I was weak, a tired old woman who'd roll over at the first sign of trouble. He thought wrong. "No," I said, the word cutting through the silence like a blade. My voice trembled with the force of my anger, but I didn't care. "Absolutely not. This house is mine, Mark. It's not yours to sell, not yours to handle. I've worked my entire life to keep this place, to make it a home for my family, and I'm not signing it over to you or anyone else. You don't get to take that from me." Mark's expression shifted, the mask of concern slipping to reveal something colder, harder. He took a step closer, his tone dropping to a low, almost patronizing drawl. "Martha, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. You're not in a position to fight this. You don't have the resources, the energy, or, frankly, the legal standing to keep dragging this out. I'm offering you a way out, a way to avoid the mess of a drawn-out battle. Sign the papers, and we'll take care of everything. Refuse, and you're only hurting yourself. And Julia." The mention of Julia, the implication that I was somehow burdening her by standing my ground, was the final straw. I glanced at her, still standing silently by the door, her eyes fixed on the floor. I wanted to believe she'd step in, that she'd see through his manipulation and choose me, her mother, over him. "Julia," I said, my voice breaking with desperation, "you can't let him do this. This is my home, our home. You grew up here. Don't let him take it away from us. Please." She shifted uncomfortably, her grip tightening on the box, but she didn't look up. "Mom, I think Mark's right. This could be the best way to move forward. I don't want to fight with you, but I can't keep worrying about you here alone. I'm sorry." Her words were quiet, almost robotic, and they shattered the last shred of hope I'd been clinging to. She wasn't going to stand with me. She'd chosen him, his logic, his control, over everything we'd shared. I turned back to Mark, the betrayal fueling a fire I hadn't felt in years. "You're not doing this for me, Mark. You're doing it for yourself. I see it now. Every comment about the house's value, every suggestion to downsize, every little jab at my independence. You've been planning this, haven't you? Waiting for the right moment to push me out so you could cash in. You're not family. You don't care about Julia or me. You care about what you can get out of this, and I'm not going to let you have it." His jaw tightened, a flicker of anger crossing his face before he smoothed it over with a forced smile. "You're upset, Martha. I get it, but you're wrong about me. I'm trying to help, and you're making it personal when it doesn't need to be. Let's talk about this later, when you've calmed down." He reached for the silver frame on the nearby table, the one I'd brought from my bedroom, the one with Tom and me on our wedding day. as if to move it into a box. A casual gesture meant to assert his control over my space, my memories. That was when I snapped. "Don't touch that!" I shouted, lunging forward to snatch the frame from his hand before he could. My voice echoed in the room, raw and unfiltered, and for the first time, I saw a flash of surprise in his eyes. I held the frame to my chest, my heart pounding, and glared at him with every ounce of rage I'd been holding back. This is mine. My life, my home, my memories. They're not yours to take. You've manipulated Julia, turned her against me, made her think I'm some broken thing that needs fixing. But I'm not. I'm still her mother, still the woman who raised her, who fought for her, who built this life from nothing after her father died. And you're nothing but a vulture, circling around waiting to pick at what's left of my family. I see you, Mark. I see what you're doing, and I'm not going to let you win. The room went still, the weight of my words hanging heavy between us. Mark's face was a mask of barely contained frustration, his hands clenching at his sides. But he didn't respond right away. Julia, still by the door, looked up at last, her eyes wide with something I couldn't quite read. Shock, guilt, maybe even a trace of realization. But she didn't speak, didn't move to intervene. And that silence cut deeper than anything Mark could have said. I took a step back, still clutching the frame, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. I'd said it, laid bare the truth I'd been too afraid to voice until now. I'd confronted him, exposed his motives, and in doing so, I'd drawn a line in the sand. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my dignity, my right to exist on my own terms. And I wasn't going to back down, no matter how much it hurt to stand alone. Mark recovered quickly, his voice low and measured, but there was an edge to it now, a crack in his polished facade. "You're making a mistake, Martha. You're turning this into a war when it doesn't have to be. Think about what you're doing to Julia, to yourself. I'm giving you one last chance to do this the easy way. Sign the papers, or we'll have to explore other options. Legal ones, if necessary." His threat hung in the air, cold and deliberate, but it only hardened my resolve. "Do what you have to, Mark," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I'm not signing anything. This is my home, and I'll fight for it with everything I have. You want a war? Fine. But I'm not the weak old woman you think I am. I've survived worse than you, and I'll survive this too." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable before turning to Julia. "Let's give her some space," he muttered, his tone clipped. "She'll come around when she realizes she doesn't have a choice." He walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the hall, and Julia hesitated, her gaze flickering between me and the doorway. For a second, I thought she might say something, might reach out, but then she turned and followed him, leaving me alone with the weight of my defiance. I sank back into my chair, the silver frame still pressed against my chest, my hands trembling with the aftermath of the confrontation. I'd stood up to him, said the things I'd been holding back for months, maybe years, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the start of something bigger, something uglier, a battle I wasn't sure I could win. Mark's threat of legal options lingered in my mind, a dark cloud over the fragile hope I'd clung to. I didn't know what he meant by it, not exactly, but I knew it wasn't a bluff. He had resources, connections, a ruthless determination I couldn't match. And Julia, my own daughter, was on his side, whether by choice or manipulation. I couldn't tell anymore. I looked down at the frame, at Tom's face frozen in time, and felt a pang of loneliness so sharp it stole my breath. I wished he were here, wished I could hear his steady voice telling me what to do, how to fight. But he wasn't, and I had to do this on my own, or almost on my own. I thought of Ellen again, her unwavering support, and knew I needed to see her, to sit with someone who still saw me as Martha, not as a problem to be solved. I stood, my legs shaky but determined, and grabbed my coat once more. I wasn't running away this time. I was regrouping, gathering my strength for whatever came next. As I stepped outside, the cold Ohio air biting at my skin. I glanced back at the house, at the warm glow of the windows against the darkening sky. This was my home, my life, my proof that I could stand against the odds. And no matter what Mark or Julia did, no matter how hard they pushed, I wasn't going to let them take it from me. The walk to Ellen's bungalow felt longer than usual, each step heavy with the weight of the day. But when I saw the familiar porch light flickering in the distance, a small measure of relief washed over me. Ellen was waiting at the door when I arrived, her face etched with concern as she pulled me into a hug. "Come in, Martha," she said, her voice a balm to my frayed nerves. "Tell me everything. We'll figure this out together." And as I stepped into her warm, cluttered kitchen, the smell of chamomile tea lingering in the air, I felt the first real flicker of hope since this nightmare began. I wasn't alone. Not completely. And with Ellen by my side, with the memory of Tom in my heart, I knew I could face whatever Mark threw at me next. The battle for my home, for my life, had just begun, and I was ready to fight. I sat at Ellen's kitchen table, the warmth of the chamomile tea in my hands a small comfort against the storm raging inside me. The familiar clutter of her home, potted herbs on the windowsill, a stack of gardening magazines on the counter, the faint hum of her old refrigerator, grounded me in a way my own house couldn't right now. Ellen sat across from me, her weathered hands folded on the table, her eyes filled with a quiet strength that reminded me why I'd come to her. She didn't interrupt as I poured out the details of the confrontation with Mark, the way his threat of legal options had chilled me to the bone, the way Julia's silence had cut deeper than any of his words. When I finished, my voice hoarse and my hands trembling around the mug, Ellen leaned forward, her expression resolute. "Martha, you're not going to lose your home. Not if I have anything to say about it," she said, her tone firm but kind. "Mark's playing a dangerous game, trying to intimidate you into signing over the deed. But he's not invincible, and neither is Julia if she's letting him pull the strings. You need to fight this with more than just words. You need someone who knows the law, someone who can protect your rights. I know a lawyer, a good one, who helped my nephew with a property dispute a few years back. His name's Daniel Carter. He's tough, but fair, and he doesn't back down from bullies like Mark. I'll call him first thing tomorrow if you're willing to meet with him." I nodded, the idea of bringing in a lawyer both daunting and empowering. I'd never been one to seek legal help. Tom and I had always handled our problems on our own. But this was different. This wasn't just a family disagreement. It was a calculated attempt to strip me of my independence, my legacy. If Mark was willing to threaten legal action, I needed to be ready to counter it with more than just my stubbornness. "Yes, I'll meet with him," I said, my voice steadier now. "I can't let Mark think he's won. I need to show him, and Julia, that I'm not going anywhere." Ellen gave me a small, encouraging smile. "That's the Martha I know. The one who doesn't give up, no matter the odds. You've got more fight in you than they realize. But for tonight, stay here. You don't need to go back to that house with them hovering over you like vultures. Take a breather, get some rest, and we'll tackle this together in the morning." I hesitated, the thought of leaving my home, even for a night, feeling like a small surrender. But Ellen was right. I needed space, a chance to clear my head and gather my strength without Mark's cold gaze or Julia's robotic apologies weighing me down. "All right," I agreed finally. "Just for tonight. But I'm not running away, Ellen. I'm coming back, and I'm going to fight for what's mine." That night, I slept in Ellen's guest room, the unfamiliar bed and the quiet of her house, a strange contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. My dreams were fragmented, filled with images of Tom's face in that silver frame, of Julia as a little girl laughing in our backyard, of Mark's smirk as he reached for my memories. I woke early, the gray light of dawn filtering through the curtains, a renewed sense of purpose settling over me. I wasn't just fighting for my house. I was fighting for myself, for the life I'd built, for the right to grow old on my own terms. Ellen was already up when I shuffled into the kitchen, a pot of coffee brewing and her phone in hand. "I called Daniel," she said as she poured me a cup. "He's got an opening this morning at 10. I told him the basics, enough to know it's urgent. His office is downtown, not far from the courthouse. I'll drive you if you want. I took the coffee, the warmth seeping into my hands, and nodded. Thank you, Ellen. I don't know what I'd do without you. Her support, unwavering and fierce, was a lifeline I hadn't known I needed until now. With her by my side, the daunting prospect of facing a lawyer, of diving into a legal battle, felt a little less impossible. We arrived at Daniel Carter's office just before 10, a modest space on the third floor of an old brick building downtown. The receptionist, a young woman with a kind smile, ushered us into a small conference room where Daniel was waiting. He was a man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His handshake was firm, his demeanor calm but direct as he gestured for us to sit. Mrs. Thompson, Ellen told me a bit about your situation, he began, his voice steady. I understand your daughter and her fiancé are pressuring you to move into a care facility and sell your home, potentially against your wishes. I'd like to hear it from you, though. Tell me everything, from the beginning. I took a deep breath, the weight of the past few weeks spilling out as I recounted Julia's growing distance, Mark's insidious comments about the house's value, the way they'd started packing my things without my consent, and finally, Mark's brazen request to transfer the deed to him for a supposed sale. Daniel listened intently, jotting down notes on a legal pad, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the table. Martha, what you're describing raises serious red flags, he said, his tone measured but firm. In the state of Ohio, no one can force you to sell your property or sign over a deed without your consent, regardless of their relationship to you. If Mark is pressuring you to transfer ownership to him, even temporarily, that could be construed as attempted fraud or coercion, especially if there's evidence of financial gain on his part. As for Julia, her involvement complicates things emotionally, but legally, she has no standing to make decisions about your property or living situation unless you've granted her power of attorney, which I assume you haven't. I shook my head, a small relief washing over me at the confirmation that I hadn't signed away my rights. No, I haven't. I've never even considered it. I've always handled my own affairs, even after my husband passed. Daniel nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Good. That works in your favor. Here's what I suggest. First, we need to secure your ownership of the property. You mentioned the deed is in a lockbox in your attic. I'll draft a formal affidavit confirming your intent to retain ownership and your refusal to transfer or sell at this time. We'll file it with the county recorder's office to create a public record of your position. Second, I'll send a cease and desist letter to Mark and Julia, explicitly stating that any further attempts to pack your belongings or pressure you into a sale will be considered harassment and potential grounds for legal action. And third, I want to look into Mark's background, his financial dealings, any history of similar behavior. If he's as calculating as you say, there might be a pattern we can use to discredit his motives. The plan, laid out so clearly, felt like a shield, a tangible way to push back against the helplessness that had consumed me. I agreed to everything, signing the necessary paperwork to retain Daniel as my attorney, and providing him with the details he needed to access the deed and draft the letters. As we left his office, Ellen squeezed my arm, her eyes bright with encouragement. You're doing the right thing, Martha. This is your fight, and now you've got the right people in your corner. Over the next few days, I stayed with Ellen, a temporary retreat that allowed me to breathe without the constant pressure of Mark and Julia's presence. Daniel worked quickly, filing the affidavit and sending the cease and desist letter via certified mail to both of them. I didn't go back to the house during that time, though Ellen drove by once to check on things and reported that the boxes were still stacked by the door, untouched since I'd left. The silence from Julia and Mark was eerie, almost more unsettling than their aggression had been. I couldn't help but wonder what they were planning, whether Mark was regrouping for a bigger push, or if the legal warning had rattled him. Either way, I knew this wasn't over. It was during this waiting period that I received a call from Daniel with an update that shifted the ground beneath me. Martha, I've done some digging into Mark's background, he said, his voice clipped with a mix of concern and satisfaction. Turns out, he's got a history of questionable real estate dealings. A few years back, he was involved in a case where he convinced an elderly couple to sign over their property under the pretense of managing a sale for them. He pocketed a significant portion of the proceeds before the family caught on and sued. The case settled out of court, but it's a clear pattern of targeting vulnerable individuals for financial gain. I've compiled the documentation, court filings, public records, even a few news articles. It's not enough to charge him with anything outright, but it's damning evidence of his intent. If he tries to push this further, we can use it to paint him as a predator in any legal proceedings. The news hit me like a punch, confirming every suspicion I'd had about Mark's motives. He wasn't just opportunistic. He was predatory. A man who saw people like me as nothing more than stepping stones to profit. The thought of him targeting others, of him seeing my home as just another deal to close, fueled a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. I thanked Daniel, my resolve hardening. With this evidence, I wasn't just fighting to keep my house. I was fighting to expose Mark for what he was, to protect not just myself, but anyone else he might prey on in the future. After a week at Ellen's, I knew it was time to return. I couldn't hide forever, and with Daniel's legal protections in place, I felt ready to face whatever waited for me at home. Ellen drove me back, her presence a quiet source of strength as we pulled into my driveway. The house looked the same as ever, the faded shutters and overgrown garden a testament to the life I'd built here. But the air felt charged, heavy with the anticipation of confrontation. As I unlocked the door, my heart pounded, half expecting to find Mark and Julia waiting inside with more demands, more boxes. Instead, the house was empty, eerily quiet. The boxes were still by the door, some of them opened as if someone had rifled through them in a hurry. But there was no sign of Julia or Mark. A note sat on the kitchen table, written in Julia's precise handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked it up, the words blurring for a moment before I forced myself to read them. "Mom, I got the letter from your lawyer. I didn't realize how much this was hurting you, or how it looked from your side. Mark and I are stepping back for now. I need time to think. I'm sorry for how this has gone. Julia." The note was short, devoid of the warmth I craved. But it was something. A crack in the wall she'd built, a hint that she might be questioning her choices. I set it down, a mix of relief and sadness washing over me. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was a pause, a chance to breathe. I knew Mark wouldn't give up so easily, though. Men like him didn't back down at the first sign of resistance. That suspicion was confirmed 2 days later, when Daniel called again, his voice urgent. "Martha, Mark's lawyer reached out. He's claiming you're mentally unfit to manage your own affairs and is petitioning for a conservatorship over your estate. It's a long shot. There's no evidence to support his claim, and Julia hasn't signed on as a co-petitioner. But it's a clear attempt to undermine your autonomy. I've prepared a response, including the documentation of his past dealings and affidavits from Ellen, and a few of your neighbors attesting to your independence and mental clarity. We've got a court date set for next week to challenge this. I'm confident we can shut it down, but I need you to be there, to show the judge you're fully capable of fighting for yourself." The news shook me, but it also solidified my determination. Mark wasn't just after my house. He was after my very identity, trying to paint me as incompetent to justify taking control. It was a low blow, a desperate move that only exposed his true nature further. I agreed to everything Daniel suggested, spending the next few days preparing with him, gathering statements from friends and neighbors who'd seen me live independently for years. Ellen, ever my rock, stayed by my side, helping me organize my thoughts and reminding me of my strength every time doubt crept in. The day of the court hearing arrived, a crisp Ohio morning that felt heavier than it should have. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy blazer and slacks that made me feel put together, a small armor against the vulnerability of standing before a judge. Ellen drove me to the courthouse, her hand on mine as we walked in, and Daniel met us outside the hearing room, his briefcase bulging with the evidence we'd compiled. "We've got this, Martha," he said, his tone reassuring. "The law is on your side, and so is the truth. Inside, Mark sat at the opposite table with his lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit who avoided looking at me. Julia was there too, seated behind Mark, her face pale and her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She didn't meet my eyes, and I couldn't tell if it was guilt or resolve that kept her gaze averted. The judge, a stern woman with graying hair, called the session to order, and the arguments began. Mark's lawyer painted a picture of me as frail, forgetful, a danger to myself who needed protection from well-meaning family. It was a caricature, a twisted version of reality that made my blood boil. But I stayed silent, trusting Daniel to counter it. And he did, methodically dismantling their claims with evidence of my independence. Bills paid on time, community involvement, testimonials from those who knew me best. He presented the documentation of Mark's past, the predatory pattern of targeting vulnerable individuals, and framed the conservatorship petition as a clear attempt at financial exploitation. My client, Martha Thompson, is a capable, independent woman who has maintained her home and life for decades, Daniel concluded, his voice ringing with conviction. This petition is not about her well-being. It's about control and profit, and we ask the court to dismiss it with prejudice. The judge took a recess to review the evidence, and in that tense half hour, I felt the weight of every eye in the room. Julia finally looked at me then, her expression unreadable, but I saw the faintest tremble in her lip, a crack in her facade. When the judge returned, her ruling was swift and decisive. Based on the evidence presented, I find no grounds for a conservatorship over Martha Thompson. The petitioner's history raises serious concerns about motive, and Mrs. Thompson has demonstrated clear competence in managing her affairs. The petition is dismissed, and I'm issuing a protective order prohibiting any further attempts to coerce Mrs. Thompson into relinquishing her property or autonomy without due process. Case closed. The gavel fell, and a wave of relief crashed over me, so strong I nearly swayed in my seat. Ellen squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes, and Daniel gave me a rare smile. "You did it, Martha," he murmured. "You're free." Mark's face was a mask of barely contained fury as he stood, his lawyer muttering something to him before they exited the room. Julia lingered for a moment, her gaze finally meeting mine. And I saw it then. Guilt, raw and unguarded. She approached slowly, her steps hesitant, and stopped a few feet away. "Mom, I didn't know. About Mark, about his past. I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting you. But I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. Not right away. But I want to make this right. If you'll let me." Her words, fragile and sincere, pierced through the anger I'd carried for weeks. I wanted to lash out, to tell her how much her betrayal had hurt. But I saw the pain in her eyes, the realization of what she'd almost cost me. I nodded, my throat tight. "We've got a lot to rebuild, Julia. But I'm willing to try if you are. Just no more Mark. I can't have him in my life. Not after this." She swallowed hard, tears spilling over as she nodded. "He's gone, Mom. I ended things this morning, before the hearing. I couldn't stand by him after seeing the truth. I just hope I'm not too late to fix things with you. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start, a bridge we could cross together over time." I hugged her, the first real embrace we'd shared in months, and felt a piece of my heart begin to heal. Mark was out of our lives, my home was safe, and Julia was reaching out. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for now. That evening, I returned to my house, the weight of the day still lingering but lighter than it had been in weeks. I walked through the rooms, touching the familiar surfaces, the scuff marks on the floor, the faded spot on the couch, the mantle where the silver frame sat waiting. I picked it up, tracing Tom's face with my finger, and felt a quiet peace settle over me. This was my home, my life, and I'd fought for it. I'd won. I carried the frame outside to the small garden in the backyard, a space I hadn't tended in too long. With careful hands, I placed it on the old wooden bench where Tom and I used to sit, a silent tribute to the strength he'd given me, even in memory. Then I knelt in the dirt, pulling weeds and smoothing the soil, reclaiming this space as I'd reclaimed my life. The act was simple, grounding, a reconnection to the woman I'd always been. Resilient, independent, rooted in this place that held my heart. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the garden, I sat back on my heels, the ache of the battle easing into something softer, something like hope. I'd faced Mark's greed, Julia's betrayal, the threat of losing everything, and I'd come out stronger. My home wasn't just four walls. It was my proof, my victory, my peace. And that's how I took back my life, brick by brick, memory by memory, until I stood tall in the place I'd always belonged. If this story touched you, if it made you think about the battles we fight for our dignity and our homes, I'd love for you to leave a like. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to someone trying to take what's yours, even if it was family? How did you find the strength to fight? Share your stories with me. And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice. Until next time, take care.